giant one. That's okay. She wants to. Not interested in
Okay, this is, I think, maybe we'll try next time. Doing the sermon first, starting later, maybe I should start with that. Starting later, doing the sermon first, and then going into the rest of the service. So we'll flip the service on. So sermon, singing, meditation, all of that, prayer. And then that way, we'll start a little later. And there's been issues with the stream, so that's why we're trying to figure out a way to interrupting the upstairs stream. So we do a sermon and turn off the stream, and then we can enjoy our meditation time and all that by ourselves without the stream on. So yeah, so that's a suggestion. Throwing it out there. If you have any feedback, let me know. But I'm talking with usually Samuel and Abba were helping me with the stream. So we're trying to figure out some solutions to this. Today we don't have singing. So it's a little different today also. It's a little bit more forced by hand. We're going to go and straight into what we normally do. So we're going to go right into the Bible reading by starting with meditation. So let me hand out a few coloring sheets. We have a couple more from last week if you need it. Here. There. I put 3.
Okay.
There. Here. It's 7. One there. Okay, well we have last week's also. Do you want to color? There you go. We also have a low resolution one, if anyone wants that one. If you want to be a little bit more detailed.
Grant's coloring for you. Color pencil, and I wanted to make sure that if we have kids doing it, they can't break them. Don't break. No, don't. No.
So, just wanted to mention before we start the meditation time where we're going to be quiet, the psalm, I'm just going through Psalms, if you haven't noticed, for meditation. I'm just going through chapter 1 through 9, and I'm doing my best to pick whatever verses are chapter and through those verses for meditation. So ironically, as I usually do the Lectio Divina first, because it's really going chapter by chapter. But instead I did my own part first, where I planned the verses that I'm going to be reading that are most relevant to the sermon. I read one from the Old Testament, one from the Gospel, one from the New Testament. And it just so happened, the verse that I found that felt very appropriate today was the Lectio Divina verse. So this verse is not only next, but it is also connected to today's sermon. So we're going to pay attention to that in maybe a different light, but I'll reread a different verse in the Old Testament when we get there. So we're going from Psalm 9. And you probably have a picture of the throne in heaven, and you'll know his wife. So normally I'll read and just go ahead and sit in silence. You can color, you can write, you can use moments to be able to focus on the Word of God. This first time I'm reading, you're just focusing on what word or phrase stands out for you. It's from Psalm 9, 7 through 10. But the Lord sits enthroned forever. He has established his throne for judgment. He judges the world with righteousness. He judges the peoples with equity. The Lord is a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. And those who know your name put their trust in you. forsaken those who seek you. What word or phrase stands out for you? Go ahead and take a moment to consider. Read it one more time. Go ahead and pay attention to the phrase or word you pick and the words around it. Think about where you're at right now in your life, in your job, in your school, with your family, whatever is pertinent to you, whatever is important. Go ahead and place context around that word or phrase. Why did God signify that word or phrase for you right now? Psalm 9:17. The Lord sits enthroned forever. He has established his throne for judgment. He judges the world with righteousness. He judges the peoples with equity. The Lord is a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. And those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. Place context around the word or phrase. How is God speaking to you today in the word? Read one last time. Go ahead and rest in the word of God. Psalm 9:17. That the Lord sits enthroned forever. He has established his throne for judgment. He judges the world with righteousness. He judges the peoples with equity. The Lord is a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. And those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. Go ahead and rest. Be grateful for the word of God that he has spoken to you today. Time of prayer, transition from the time of meditation to speaking with God. Oh, it can be synonymous, but in this case, we become a little bit more direct and we ask for something, maybe be grateful for something, whatever the direction is. What prayer do you have today? Time continues for the service to figure out perfect service. Fill up the ideal goal. Lord, hear our prayers. Going to the time of communion. Let's remember what Jesus said on that final night before he was crucified. When we get there in John, I think we'll get a different flavor or taste of what was happening that night. Hopefully that'll be helpful for you as we do it. I have no doubt in my mind that we will not time it correctly. We're not going to be in John 16 by the time Easter comes. But we'll do our best to associate it next year. But we took the bread, he broke it, shared it, he said, "This is my body that I broke for you. Take, eat, remember me. Remember my body that has been sacrificed." He did the same thing with the cup. He took a cup, drank from it, and shared it. Asked the same thing for everyone to take and drink. And also to remember repentance. Entire chapter, we skip over. This idea of repentance is never brought up. Belief is talked about frequently. Christian life is hard. That's what John 6 showed us. It's easy to get in, but it's exclusive. Once you're in, you're in. You can't really do other things in that same way. And it's hard to continue, to maintain. So we enter chapter 7, and we're not going to go over large portions of this chapter because there's a little bit of repetition. There's some things that we don't need to talk about necessarily to get the entire idea of the book of John. I want you to feel really comfortable with the book of John. You don't need to go all John chapter 7. But I'm going to point out the important pieces, similar to what you're going to see today. We're not going to necessarily talk about each individual part, but I'll explain. This was one of the most important shifts in Jesus' ministry. It's this transition point that's very important. He's now in trouble. If you're watching a movie, this is where it gets really stressful. You're watching and you're on edge. What's about to happen? And we could have thought that he was in trouble before because of the opposition and what people are saying, but now he's going to be in a lot more trouble. That fire on the stove is going to be turned up to its maximum very soon. And the key to this is, you'll notice it's Jesus who's doing the turning. He's the one that's activating it because it's something he needs to do. He's waiting for God to tell him to do something. Keep going up, I will tell you when to max it out. And so now in John 7, we're going to see a similar type of interaction. You're going to see Jesus' brothers. And he's going to remind them, it's not my time. Jesus only responds to God when he's instructed for his time. But we're going to get an interesting interaction, so I'll put that out for you. And I want us to focus on a particular section of this, and we're going to continue that in John chapter 15 and 16. Whenever we get to that, maybe next week. But we'll continue the discussion today in Sunday. That'll be an important discussion that we can have. Let's start thinking about this question. What makes Christians hated by the world? What is it about us that we should be hated? That's the instructions that's given in the Bible. So let me read today's verses, and I'll explain a few parts of it before we focus on my question. This is John chapter 7, verses 1 through 8. I'm going to read through it, and I'm just going to point out the important things. After this, Jesus went about Galilee. He did not wish to go about in Judea because the Jews were looking for an opportunity to kill him. Now the Jewish festival of booths was near. So his brothers said to him, "Leave here, go to Judea, so that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. For no one who wants to be widely known acts in secret. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." For not even his brothers believed in him. Jesus said to them, "My time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify against it, that its works are evil. Go to the festival yourselves. I am not going to this festival, for my time has not yet fully come." Spoiler alert, next verse Jesus says, "I'm not going," he doesn't go, and then we'll get to those verses next week though. But let me explain a few parts before we get into today's main point, answering that question. And of course, it's going to be a sermon version. We'll discuss it more later in Sunday. First one, after this, Jesus went about Galilee. He did not wish to go into Judea because the Jews were looking for an opportunity to kill him. So quick geography, Galilee is in the north. It's where the Sea of Galilee is found. That's where Nazareth is found. That's where a lot of Jesus' work was being done. And we kind of see why. He was going to be killed if he went to Judea. Judea is in the south. Judea is where Jerusalem is. Judea is where Bethlehem is. So that's where you have this division. Jesus had just fed the 5,000. That was in Galilee. And we saw in chapter 6 some difficult things happen. And a lot of the disciples left, specifically because it was too hard. Jesus was saying some controversial stuff, and it was difficult to follow him. Thousands of disciples followed him, ended up rejecting him. In verse 60 of chapter 6, they said, "This teaching is difficult. Who can accept it?" Imagine taking a college class or a graduate class, and you take a professor class and it's too hard. I just talked to a student that goes to high school, and apparently the class he hates the most is an English class. And the English class is known by the school to be taught by a specific teacher who will lower your GPA over time. That's what they know her as. She's the one that lowers your GPA. Very strict. And so imagine you drop out of that class. You say, "I'm not going to take it." Right? But then, chapter 7, murdered this professor. And like jumping to that extreme sudden. I disagree with this teaching, so I'm going to kill you. And so we can see that we're jumping to conclusion a little bit here. there's clearly something that happened in between. Right? So what happened between chapter 6 and 7? Well, we get a sense of it. Verse 2. Now the festival of booths was near. So, calendar now, history of the Jewish calendar. Passover happens in around spring. Festival of Booths is a harvest festival. It happens around October, September, October. So you have about 6 months of time that pass between when Jesus fed the 5,000 and when this festival was about to happen. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just know that difference. 6 months is a lot of time for stuff to go down, right? So for things to go wrong, for people to get even more upset about who Jesus is. So we have to keep that in mind that more than likely, at least, we can assume also that it could be over a year, maybe a couple Passovers even passed. But it was a specific festival of booths that he wanted to. It makes more sense that it was the most recent one. So, the Festival of Booths, very briefly, it's a festival. It's exactly what it sounds like, where you go and you sleep in tents around Jerusalem. It's a pilgrimage festival, and it's really. I thought it was a really cool idea. I've been researching buying a tent recently. I like that. It's fun to be able to kind of go out. You're living somewhere that's kind of temporary, but you're making it happen. It's cool. It's a cool idea. And so they did this in a remembrance of when they were stuck in the wilderness. If they were stuck in the wilderness for years. So they did. They would do a service on Sabbath, and then 7 days they would be camping out in the wilderness, and then another Sabbath service would end. So you can think of it as almost like our winter camp and our summer camp, right? You can just think of it in that mentality. Which this year, summer camp, we're going to Punmore. Should be fun. I'll be speaking. It'll be a good time. The timing is what's interesting. It's separate than the Passover. So multiple months can pass by. There's plenty of time for Jesus' rejection to turn into, we want to take this guy. Okay, so you read verse 3 through 5. So his brother said to him, leave here and go to Judea, so that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. For no one who wants to be widely known acts in secret. If you do these things, show yourself to the world, for not even his brothers believed in him. John gives us a little bit of insight here. This is a sarcastic statement. Or it could be genuine in that they're trying to figure out, Jesus, you can do all these miracles. Why aren't you going and taking over? Right? We don't know exactly what the perspective is, but we do know there's a mentality that is adopted by them eventually. Right? If you go to the other Gospels, specifically Matthew 12, 46 through 50, Mark 3, 31 through 35, Luke 8, 19 through 21, you get a story that's only in those Gospels. It doesn't go with what Jesus said. Ironically, Jesus says something similar in this chapter that we're going to read, that we're studying. But in this case, it's very specific to his family. In those Gospel stories, Jesus is teaching, and someone interrupts him and says, your mother and brothers are outside. And Jesus responds with a question to that answer and says, who are my brothers? These are my brothers. He points to the people that are there sitting and listening. And this is the phrase that we get in John also. Those who do God's will are my brothers. Right? So, were his brothers not doing God's will? Probably not. Maybe it's more than likely they were against what Jesus was saying. They weren't fully on board. But we get later on a few names of Jesus' brothers. Matthew 13, 55, Mark 6, 3. Two names are very important. James and Judas. We may think Judas, what's Judas? Well, let me try the other name that gets used. Jude. Right? So we see that they eventually will write a letter that will be in the Bible. So they become relevant people, but not at this time. It takes some time for them to fully understand. Either way, Jesus' brother's invitation set up. Jesus says, what? Verse 6 through 8. Jesus said to them, my time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify against it, that his works are evil. Go to the festival yourselves. I am not going to this festival, for my time has not yet fully come. As I said earlier, we've heard that phrase, my time has not yet come. People don't tell Jesus what to do with God. Even though he still listened to his mother at the wedding. Unique situation, always listen to your mother. But not here. Verse 8, he refuses to go. Even though, again, spoiler, he does go. He will eventually go, and he goes covertly. Another spoiler, he ends up preaching in the temple. So even then, he doesn't fully disappear in the crowd, he still makes a scene after this big deal. So, but let's focus on verse 7. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify against it that its works are evil. Why would Jesus and Christians supposed to be hated? Why? I'm not going to get into why Christians are hated yet, because that's going to come up John 15 and 16. Let's just conflate those together. Let's combine those together right now, just realizing if you're a Christian, the hatred for Jesus is also on us. Okay, that's what we're going to eventually get to conclusion. So just assume that. But then before we answer why the hate, let's figure out what's evil in the first place, or what's good. Think about those phrases for a second. I think it's appropriate timing that we use a very obvious example of what evil is. I'm sure if I asked you, maybe all of you would say exactly the same thing. Recently, we had the release of what? The Epstein files. That's evil. I mean, categorically, if you're a follower of Christ, if you're not a follower of Christ, that's a good litmus test of what people should never do and what is depraved in this society. Okay? But let's break it down a little bit more, because there needs to be a little bit of understanding, especially in our personal life. It's not always that obvious. Right? For that, let's go back to one of the first sermons I gave. It was a very important sermon. That's why I started with it. It's about truth. And I mentioned to you that truth is subjective. And it's uncomfortable for a lot of Christians to hear that. And I know a lot of people become either curious. It will get a reaction out of people when I say it that way. So let me explain. I use the example of a car accident. This is constantly what I use as the example for this. If there's a two-car accident, and you take both of the drivers out of the cars, and let's say they have passengers, you take both of the passengers out of the cars, and then let's say you have onlookers, you take all those onlookers, let's say you take one on, you take these 5 people, and you inject them with the truth serum. There's no such thing, but let's say it exists and it works. You inject it, so you know for a fact they're telling the truth. And then you hook them up to a lie detector. There's no accurate lie detector. There's some things that work in certain ways. It's not actually a truth or lie detector. So let's assume it's accurate. You hook them up, and then you ask them. All of them experience exactly the same thing. Recall what you remember. Recall the car accident. All of them were involved in a car accident, right? Assuming they're trying to tell the truth, right, with all the stuff that we've done, and assuming you know that they are attempting their best to tell the truth, there is a high chance 2 of the stories will contradict. How's that possible? Is one of them lying? No. We're making that point. Nobody's lying. The perspective and emotion of an individual distorts your memory. And because of that, you are fully convinced the memory you have, which has been distorted, you don't know, it's been distorted, is your living reality. It is what you experience. It is the truth, 100%. And it can be completely contradictory to somebody else. That's the way memory works. And because of that, we have to realize that even truth at that level is subjective. It depends on the person. It depends on perspective. It depends on influences such as emotions. And on top of that, and here's where I take this and apply it to what we can understand, especially from the Bible, there's no such thing as a capital T. Okay? And I'm going to explain why, because it's very important. It's weird, but I guarantee you, the perspective I offer is very important. You can't have this random, disconnected idea out there that is absolutely accurate, perfect example of reality, that eventually we can figure out. And there's 2 main reasons for this. First, truth is based on the perspective of the individual. So the moment a person is discovering it, it's going to start distorting. Second, human activity has to be involved with that discovery. Again, it's going to distort what that memory becomes eventually when they grab it. So there was all these perspectives of truth that we use and share. And you have truth. And your truth is great. I love your truth. I love hearing about your truth. My truth. I've been working on my truth a lot too. My truth is great too. We can share them. We interact. Maybe I have a little bit of truth that can help you. You have a little bit of truth that can help me. And we go back and forth and we assist each other in understanding what truth is going to help us most. Right? But what we're actually doing in life, we're sharing truth. That's totally fine. What actually matters is looking for the truth from the perspective of God. There's no capital T truth. I fully disagree in that. But I do believe there is the perspective of the capital G. His version of truth, his version of reality is what we actually need to carry. So, why are Christians hated in the world? Is it because of our relationship to God, to Jesus? Jesus came down, it's his perspective that we're trying to figure. Well, let's think about that for a second too. I said this earlier. I said this earlier, let me ask the question. How many times does the book of John talk about repentance? Throw a number out. I heard it. 0. That was it. 0 times, not once. Never. So it's not that, this really big idea that especially evangelicals, they really care about. It's not that. Okay, well, it talks about belief a lot, right? Up until this point, it's talked about belief 24 times. In 6 and a little bit of chapter. 24 times it's talked about belief. It's not about the belief either. That's not the point. The point isn't this relationship we have, that we associate ourselves with Jesus. Or that we may put this exclusivity on how to become a Christian. That's not why we're going to be hated. So we don't have to think about those pieces. It's not about belief, but Jesus is pointing it out in a very clear way. Because I testify against works that are evil. So Christians will be hated because Jesus, and eventually by proxy us, point out what is. Is that it? Is it just the good and bad dictated by God's reality? Absolutely. 100%. I fully am on board in this belief that because we take on God's perspective on, we are going to be disliked, we are going to be pushed away, because what we're going to say and do will be opposing those that don't want their actions and belief exposed. That's the key. So let's think about it real quick. I'm going to say a phrase. It's going to become complicated, but I'll explain it. But we're going to end with this idea. If all truth, that's not again. There needs to be an ontological being outside of our reality who dictates how said reality needs to be experienced. Okay, I'm going to repeat that and then I'm going to break it down in pieces. There needs to be an ontological being outside of our reality who dictates how the reality needs to be experienced. What does ontological being? Ontological being means something. There's a person. We're all ontological beings. We exist, right? So there needs to be someone. Some people say something, right? I will explain what the something is in Sunday school. But there needs to be someone who exists. Doesn't have to be physical. It could be spiritual. Whatever the state of that being is, that ontological being has to exist. But that being has to be outside of our reality. What we understand in life, they shouldn't be impacted by it. Let me give you an extreme example. If the universe explodes, God is unaffected. He's outside of reality. He's not touched by an entire universe explosion or implosion or whatever you want to call it, right? He's not affected by what happens in reality. But here's the cool thing about this God. He has chosen to be relational in that he decided to, from his throne, from above, wherever you want to place him, to interact with us and be impacted by the decisions and the behavior and the words that we have. That's why the God that we serve is really cool. He is a very different God than any other religion that we have out there. Read the entire Old Testament. God feels betrayed. How can anybody outside of reality become betrayed? Who cares? Who cares about these people, what they are and who they are? But that's what's amazing about this God. Okay? So he exists. He has to exist. And he has to exist outside of reality. He's unaffected by reality, but he chooses to be relational with us. And here's the last part of my statement. He needs to dictate how reality is experienced. This one's my favorite. I've mentioned this before. I love physics. It's one of my favorite things to watch when I'm sitting and just trying to unwind. And if I didn't do psych, I probably would have done physics. So I'm constantly following what the most recent consensus is and what people are talking about. And one of them that is floating around, but doesn't have too much headway, surprisingly, not surprisingly, good, is that we are living in a simulation. Okay, what does that mean? It's like everything we experience is a mathematical formula. It's a computer program that an outside, more advanced civilization is running. We're living in some sort of code, right? So everything is a bunch of algorithms. to the way gravity works, to the way nuclear forces, those numbers are all inputted in specifically, how humans interact with each other, all of it. And if you think for a second, I don't agree with this, by the way, there's a lot of flaws in it. But if you think for a second, what if that was God from the beginning? What if the setup needed to be done from outside, in which he constructed everything appropriately so that it functions, and then, let it go, let it work, let it run, let it do its thing. And of course he's relational, so he involved himself, but ultimately it is done by an outside source, unaffected by the program itself, and he's able to control it in some way. That's the, think about it from that way. But here's the crazy part. Let's say the reality was set up, whatever it is. Let's say he did it, let's say he didn't even do it. We read from the Bible, starting from the Old Testament, the law, then going to the New Testament, Jesus' teachings. This is the way you're supposed to navigate this life. Here's how you're supposed to live out reality. This reality that we're stuck in, this is how you're supposed to do it. That's why God has to exist. This is the silver bullet. That mentality cannot exist on the back of any of our perspectives, or any really smart philosopher, or any other idea that we can talk about. We'll get into when we get into the Sunday school today. It's completely separate. It has to be outside, and the only functional being that can exist to do that is God, the God that we worship. And for me, it is the best argument that we have to why God is active and involving himself into the reality that we have. And so, what do? We want to connect with this God. That's what the Bible says. God's wanting to be in a relationship. We want to be in a relationship with him, right? We want to do good and avoid the evil. But that's not what we're hated. Maybe some people will be jealous. I'm sure there are some people that are like, oh, you're doing this, and everything's going well for you. Sure, that could probably happen. But Christians are hated, not because we avoid evil. It's because we expose it. We show it. That's what Jesus was saying. Christians will never be hated because we've repented or saved or believed. And I think it's a strength to think that we'll be hated purely because we do good and avoid evil. It's because we turn around and do not allow for evil to go unnoticed around us. Similar to what Christ did and showed us. When evil is exposed, hatred follows. Why? Because evil can't continue to function. Let me bring it full circle. One of my favorite authors to read or listen to or watch is Jordan Peterson. And he said once, in all my years as a clinical psychologist, I've never seen anyone ever get away with anything, not even once. It's getting away with something. When you commit evil, Peterson calls it that you twist the fabric of reality.